What? What?
So I understand, it was a 5-MeO or NN?
Well, this is now my question. I don't know, because my experience was emotional. My experience was profound. Gathered a load of answers, but in my experience, I saw entities. I felt love. I actually started crying and sobbing during the experience because of the.
Oh, that's just because you're a little girl, man.
More than likely as well, yeah.
I'm always, now that I know that this space is real, I always say things like I'm about to say with some trepidation because I don't want to offend anybody. But it did feel to me in that moment that was the architect. Like that's the above the thing. Like it's
on 5-MeO.
Yes, it's like
right.
the big architects.
Yes.
And then NN feels, even though it's still insane, it feels more like the management company. By the way, I want to tell you something. From all the podcasts that I've done so far, and I've done quite a few, yours was my favorite, and everybody else is gonna hate me. But I think I don't know if it's because like one of the first ones. I mean, the first one was Soma, which was a great one. But you have this beautiful way of.
You think you know how the world works? You think that this material universe is all there is?
That's how realistic and specific NN-DMT can feel, and there ain't no fucking way a breathwork would give you that.
We got a Rumble account. Go and check it out. We live stream there Monday to Friday, 11 till 3. We play Ren, we play Chinchilla, we play Sam, we play Knox Hill, we play Eminem, we play all sorts, and a lot of country and western as well, because that's amazing. Go check out our Rumble account. Link is in the description. I honestly was under the understanding that the nucleus of an atom is the sun, and the electron is the earth, and it travels around.
It really follows, like the analogy doesn't run through at all. Like it's not like it's kind of like that. It's not even that. The system is completely different.
Right.
A quantum system is completely different. Now, I would offer a caveat here and say that it's also true that all of these things, they're approximations, they're like images that we kind of create in our minds. But it might be that the true nature of the universe is so bizarre, and obviously it is, that if you ask me what I personally think the real thing is, I think it's way stranger than that still. I think when you start getting into like string theory and QED and quantum loop gravity, what is it called? Hold on. My brain is like not firing on all cylinders for sure. Quantum loop gravity. It's not making thoughts correctly right now. Loop quantum gravity. I just mixed up the words. Let's see. John Conway, right here, who, by the way, passed away during COVID.
That's a shame.
He was a really great known mathematician.
Of COVID or during COVID?
You did hear of it? Yeah.
Yeah. So did he die of COVID or during COVID?
I think he died of COVID.
Okay.
I'm not sure though. Yeah. So, but do you know of this? Like, do you know what
this
is?
Mate. No, I don't. No, I haven't seen this.
So this is definitely going to blow your mind. So, funny enough, Conway himself always complained that this was like his biggest shadow. Like he was people only knew about him because of the Game of Life, but he discovered a lot of great things, and he was like a great mathematician. So he was very annoyed by the fact that people always mentioned the Game of Life, because he actually thought the Game of Life wasn't that substantial. He's like, it's kind of cool and interesting, but not really. I disagree with him, and I'll tell you why. So what the Game of Life is, I don't know if this one actually explains it. Let's see. So the Conway's Game of Life is a famous cellular automata is essentially a controlled environment of a screen, two-dimensional screen, in which you have these little so basically you have an ability of a square to appear or disappear. It's just a grid, right? And then depending on the rules that you set up in the initial conditions that you arbitrarily put on it, So you say that, for example, so the game of life is one type of cellular automata, and cellular automata is like a larger thing in which you can apply all kinds of rules. I'll explain right now. But the game of life is only one of these rule sets, basically. And this prompt is probably going to explain it. But if I remember correctly, if you have one square that is on and it has two squares around it. No, sorry. If there's two squares, then they make a third one because they like make a baby or something.
Okay.
And then if you have four squares in the same like line, in the same like if they're clustered, then I think that one of them dies of overpopulation or something like that.
Okay.
If I'm not mistaken, it only has 3 or 4 rules. That's it.
Okay.
Which let's see what they are actually. So okay, so the first rule is any live cell with fewer than 2 live neighbors dies as if caused by underpopulation.
Any live cell with fewer than 2.
So if it's by itself, it
Yep.
dies because it's sad.
Of course.
Okay.
Yep. It's
Then-
sad.
Then the
It's
second one-
lonely. It's upset. It's depressed. It's lost
Yeah.
all passion. Yeah.
That's what we do when we're alone. We die.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the second one is any live cell with 2 or 3 live neighbors lives on to the next generation. Okay, so it's a stable formation.
Okay.
Third rule is any live cell with more than 3 live neighbors dies as if of overcrowding.
With more than 3. Okay, so 4 or more.
More than 3. And 4, any dead cell, so like it's off, with exactly 3 live neighbors become a live cell as if by reproduction.
Okay.
So I guess in an order. So you have they have to be 3 to produce the thing. This is important to understand because I've noticed when you show this to people sometimes, the ones that don't get it, later when you ask them, you realize they didn't understand that those are the only 4 rules. There's
Wow.
nothing else added. Nobody's coding anything else into the system.
Okay.
So until computers existed, cellular automata was a very difficult thing to do because you had to literally do the calculations and you have to run the thing and then you have to do another layer and you have to calculate all of it. But when computers came along, you could do this very easily. You could just tell the computer, here, this is the rules. Show me what happens when you just run the clock forward, right? So here's what happens. What you're watching right now, even right now, like the things that are moving, nobody told them to move. They had an initial condition on the bottom of the screen here. So you see you have two little squares,
Yep.
2 little squares, and then another one, 5. Under these initial conditions, given the 4 rules you just given, exactly that location and exactly under these formations, what will happen is that according to those rules, they will do these translations. There will be updates. And each step of the update, it will look like they're moving and moving in space too.
So they're not moving, they're reproducing and then dying. So it looks
Yeah,
like it's
that's
moving.
all that's happening.
Got
This
it.
is what I meant by translation. That's
it.
basically like an updating step of the computation. So
Got it.
again, nobody's coding this into the system. It's just what happens.
What?
Bro, it gets insane.
What? Mate, pause it.
Look, they're forming the thing, they're building it, and then it's going on its way. Look at this. This is not coded. We have to pause every few as
Yeah,
well,
mate.
right?
Yeah.
It's like-
Okay. A few questions. My first question is, why does it define a direction? So the only things that are being coded are those 4 rules,
That's it.
and then
And
this.
the initial condition. And the initial conditions. So different initial conditions will give you different things, and people obviously took a long time to figure out what would be the initial conditions that would give you specific things. But now we know that certain initial conditions will give you this.
It's creating an organism. This looks like a living, pulsating. This looks like a living, pulsating
cell.
Yeah.
So what makes you think that reality isn't following the same rule? I've had a couple. Let's just watch the next minute, and I'll tell you something.
What?
This is not coded, bro.
What? There's so many patterns.
Look at this table.
What? What?
Exactly 420 by mistake, actually. I spoke to a physicist about this, and this is how deep I don't want to say indoctrination, it isn't an indoctrination, but this is how deep the blind spot for people who specialize in a thing. So the physicist I spoke to, he was a string theorist, and string theorists are notoriously smarter than other physicists. Like, it requires like an extra ability to think. You really have to be very smart because the math is just mad hard. And so the level of intellect is definitely there, right? This is an instance of being too close to the thing, because we had an hour discussion. It wasn't an argument. It was a heated discussion, though, in which I was talking to him about the game of life, and he kept on insisting. He's like, no, you know, it arises from simple like perturbations, and I'm like, Mo, pause. There's nothing in physics that tells you that this should happen. And eventually, he conceded that is the case. That there's nothing in physics that tells you that this should happen. This is purely computational. But here's the thing. You put it on the screen, it does that. Computation can happen on any substrate. You can technically do computation with waves in the ocean. It's just that it's going to take forever.
Yeah. That's
why electrical switches are preferred, because they do things very quickly. But the fact that you can do computation is like a law of physics. And this arises only out of that law of physics and no other law of physics, but it seems to also give everything else follows that and not the other way around. So yeah, we made computers, but I would say that the computers are mimicking something deeper in nature that we just couldn't see before because we didn't have the interface fast enough to understand that there's an image there. And things like the game of life, like this, shows you that this phenomena is happening all the time if you just give it 4 simple conditions. And I'm not sure why Conway didn't see the true magnificence of this discovery, because I guess he didn't know what else to do with it aside from like these cool things. But now we start to understand. And in fact, Stephen Wolfram, with his new physics project now, using cellular automata, which is the larger thing that I told you that the game of life is only one version of, because you can do infinite amount of rules, right? So if you have other 4 rules or only 3 rules and other rules or whatever, you're going to get very different things, right? And only a few of them create these semi-stable scenarios, because after a while, after many, many, many iterations, some of them will continue indefinitely, but some of them can do, I don't know, 3 trillion iterations that will produce the same pattern, and then all of a sudden change. Like all of a sudden it would do something else.
So if I have 2 observations and 1 question. It looks a lot like bacteria. It looks a lot like DMT. My question is, if you had 2 of these simulation games side by side and you pressed go at start on both of them,
question.
Would they produce 2 different patterns, 2 different images, 2 different directions?
I don't remember. We should look it up. But my tendency, because it's a closed system, I think they will produce the same. Yeah. So So okay. So we're gonna have to go into chaos theory now. So okay. But this is good. We're gonna hone in on a much more structured way to do this eventually. But it just shows me how many branches this thing has in order to really have an understanding. It really helps me appreciate how much you have to carry on board to fully entertain a concept. So you asked a great question. And what you said is, like, if you put the exact same thing in the beginning, will it do the exact same thing? I don't remember, but just off the cuff, like logically, from what I understand, in a closed system, it will. And what I mean by closed system, it doesn't have external input. So if you just have a closed, frame and nothing comes from the outside as input, what you said should be the case. It should produce the same thing. But obviously, if you move one of the things in the beginning or change the rule or whatever it is at any point, it will very quickly. It will be very different.
Right.
And that's essentially what the butterfly effect is. The tiniest change in the conditions of any kind, and you have a completely different thing after a very relatively short time. But so what Stephen Wolfram is doing is that he uses all kinds of cellular automata to run computations of a very large scale. And what he discovered is there's actually a way in what he calls his hypergraph in the Rulian space. Essentially, you can have a system that when, I think it's like rule 110 or something, I forget what it is, I forget which one, but there's one rule, set of rules, that allows for all the laws of physics that we know in our world to arise. So it's literally computing our world.
Right.
That one set of rules. And what's interesting is the way they're going about it. When they discovered it's actually not a fluke and you can actually do this, they discovered that there's a potential way to now what to do is that what if you have an initial set of rules, like the 4 rules we just saw, but they dictate not just the next moves, but they also dictate the next generation of rules. So you say after 1,000 iterations, or after 1,000,000 iterations, depending on these rules and depending on exactly what happened, if this exact thing happens, update the rules in this way. So one of the rules says, let's say if there was 3 that has to be around it to be born, okay, if this thing happened after 1,000,000 iterations, change this one rule to only when 2 are present, 1 is arising. So now you're changing the rules too. You're allowing the rules to evolve, not just what's happening, right? He discovered that when you do this, you get even more complex and a more chaotic, but at the same time also more structured according to the rules that you find, patterns that emerge. So then the question becomes, can we reverse engineer our own universe in such a way that we discover what is the ultimate rule? You're looking up the tree. What was that one rule that gave rise to all the rules? And that's what they're trying to do.
So that would be the theory of life.
That would be the theory of everything.
The theory of everything.
No, when I say back there, I don't mean life. I mean the multiverse.
Yes.
I mean existence. So it's definitely not going to do.
So you could argue. Sorry to interrupt. You could argue the Big Bang, if you like, was turning the computer on. The rules were all predetermined, and then it just began.
It would probably be way bigger than the Big Bang. It would be the rule that gave rise to all the Big Bangs that could or will ever happen.
So it's a level before the Big Bang. Jesus.
way above that. Like the scale is just inconceivable. You're talking you're talking about the rule that gave rise to all the possible universes.
Yes. Every combination of every scenario that ever existed.
That ever existed. It would be the answer to the why, basically.
Do you
Let's see if there were, go ahead.
Do you ever feel like this when you dive into this? Because I'm already feeling like you can go
queasy.
Yes, well, that was after the first 5 minutes, mate. As soon as we were talking about pushing the pencil, and I was like, ah! But it almost feels like
I guess you have to find this fascinating.
Yeah, no, indeed, and I do immensely. But it seems like if further down you go, or the further up you go, there don't seem to be many answers. There does. You discover an answer and it changes everything, and you discover another answer and it changes everything, and then you look down. You find something and it changes everything, and you find something else and it changes everything. So it almost feels like either end of the spectrum is an infinity. Like you just keep going and going and going and going. Do you think the real answer maybe isn't up there and isn't down there? It's, for want of a better cliche, in here.
That's a great point. It might be the case. The only caveat I might offer to this is that, yes, it's very difficult to get into these spaces and discover something. Because right now what you and I are doing are just, two guys just chatting about a video, right? But think that some people devoted their lives to really go in there.
Of course.
And sometimes losing their sanity, actually.
Of course.
There's a few cases like these. Like Cantor, for example. But they made real discoveries that allows you and I to now talk on what we call a computer, on a video. So it's not entirely the case that you only need one or the other. And that's the point that I keep reiterating when I do, any podcasts or things like that, which is that you need both for survival and meaning. Because if nobody would ever do that, go up there and go down there, we wouldn't know that the Earth is not the center of the universe, which, by the way, to remind all the spiritual people, belonged to a sentiment that is very closely related to what they hold now, which is like, the answer is here, we are everything. This is how religious people thought. And they discovered jack squat. and it would remain that case, which is fine because the genes made us adapt to our environment, so we would be okay. But we will only be okay until the sun will become a red giant, and then there will be a looming problem that because nobody took the time to look up there or down there, you wouldn't know about, and therefore you would perish. Which, once again, is fine if you want to define life to only be bound, but like intelligent life, to only that it should only be allowed to live as long as its host star lives. Then it's sure, but that's not what life generally does. It constantly tries to survive. It constantly tries to explore new environments, and I would say that part of these explorations of new environments are looking up there and down there to be able to know that there's a sun, we go around it. It also is not the center of the universe. There's a galaxy, and so on and so forth. And it looks like it's when these things are just discovered, usually everybody at the time of that discovery say, yeah, but this will never be relevant to anything we do. Guess what? Quantum physics, as crazy as it sounds and as most removed from our daily life as it looks, without understanding it exactly, like with very, very accurately with equations and not just, talking about it, you wouldn't be able to build any electronic device. You wouldn't be able to build a phone. You wouldn't be able to build any of this because it's all dependent on understanding this very weird world.
Yes.
So is the answer here? Yes, but not only. The answer is in both, in everywhere to be found. It is definitely the answer to feel better. in the immediate moment. And but and as you know, as shared friends of ours would say, that's all that matters. I disagree. Because if that's the only thing that would matter, you would perish with the sun, maybe way before. And so this is why both are required. If you have only this attempt to only look for answers of this kind, then you would have a soulless, lifeless world that is technologically magnificent, but it's completely
pointless.
Yeah. It's just like to the next trick. Like it doesn't feel like anything really.
So
for that, you definitely need to look inside and to understand, everything that the contemplatives did and everything that the Buddha did. And so I'm 100% agree with it. It's just a different kind of science. And I think they both need to be combined in order to create a technology that is inspired by the divine, for lack of a better term.
I want to make a related segue quickly. Obviously, sure. you're very much into your spiritual journey. I very much started my spiritual journey recently. It seems when you say if humans weren't here, or more specifically, if consciousness was not here, then it would just be this amazing technological universe. But what would be the point? It seems like consciousness, one, allows us to perceive and observe this great, incredible accomplishment, whatever label you want to use. But the presence of consciousness itself seems to be the playground. Sorry. The universe seems to be the playground for consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just feel that at this point, I'm pretty convinced that consciousness is all there is.
Yes. Yeah, we've talked about this before. Would you mind going into a bit more detail on that?
Sure. So I think the closest, it's expressed the closest in a philosophical position called idealism.
Okay.
In which the basic assumption is that consciousness is the universal mind, is actually all there is. This is the basic fundamental stuff. It's not what we call physical. And then the physical is just an arising property of this mental stuff. And this is a small but very important distinction that people need to make. So people say, so it's different than panpsychism. My accent is flaring up right now. But in panpsychism, the idea is that there's a consciousness embedded in space. So there's space, and then consciousness is somehow a part of it.
Okay.
That's not the same as saying that consciousness, it's all there is.
Indeed.
Because then there's no space. There's just consciousness. There's just mental stuff. And all the rigid physical stuff, seeming physical stuff, are just structures that arise inside of the mental space. And they can have regularities and the laws of physics and everything else, but they are just third-person representations of an inner world that they're all having because they're part of this universal mind. So it's not quite the same, but it's a big distinction.
So similar.
There's nothing else but mental.
So similar to a game. So let me think of Grand Theft Auto, the game that most people will be able to connect to. When you're playing the character, the whole game hasn't loaded. Just the bits that are around you that you can see and interact with. Is consciousness like that?
The mental in this example, in idealism at least, it would not be that. It would be that the mind exists. It's that the mental stuff, it's all there is, and all of it is at once existing, and it has this infinite degrees of freedom, infinite dimensions, and it can form into all kinds of things. And the physical universe is just one form that comes into view. And obviously this physical universe, in this example, in quotations, will have smaller units of consciousness pop in it because consciousness is all there is. And they're going to be like fragmented little pockets of consciousness that will believe they're separate because they're like little bubbles.
I see.
But they're not separate. They're just they're looking at the external environment through a boundary that seems to be there, but it's not really there. And that actually plays really well with Eastern traditions, in which when you focus enough on your experience, you discover that there's just the world. There's an experiential world, but the you doesn't exist in that world. The thing that feels that I'm me doesn't exist there. The only thing that exists is experience itself. And I've actually had this experience before.
I want to hear about that. Beforehand, just a quick question. So would this tie into the theory that we are all God, just experience the universe through different states ultimately?
Yeah, the only difference there would be is that God, that universal mind, at least according to the modern version of idealism, best expressed by Bernardo Castro, that universal mind will not have the same mental facets that we do. It would have others that we can't comprehend, but it won't be like an agent so much, because it does not have an external environment. Because it is the only thing that exists, then for it, there will be no mental state that says, aha, I am this and I am doing that. It won't have that because that's environment contingent. In order for that to be the state, you need an external environment that imposes restrictions on you. And these restrictions give rise to a world in which you can do ABC, but not D, E, and G. Like you have
the laws.
Restrictions. Yeah. Well, you have restrictions according to whatever environment you find yourself in. And even though you have a mental state, you are also interacting with the restrictions. And these restrictions create a world. So you observe a world, but it, the universal mind, will not observe a world. It is the world. And because of that, it will not have the same mental facets. It would not be able to have agency.
What was your experience?
It was a few times. The most pronounced one was in the meditation retreat. I was actually going to sleep. It wasn't during a session, and it was after a particularly difficult day. I remember there was like anger was a big portion of that day. That's the energy that arose, and I couldn't shake it off, so I just kind of tried to stay with it. And then I was trying to fall asleep, and I remember I was looking at the ceiling. It was like I was in bunk beds, and I was on the bottom one, and I looked up, and I saw, and this image is kind of burned in my mind now. So it's like a portion of the bed above me, and then the ceiling, and then there was just that. And there's no better way of explaining it, but the central agency portion of the experience just falls out of the picture. Just it's not there. And I always say this, but I think it's important to emphasize. To me, at least, the most remarkable thing about this experience was how unremarkable it was. I always say I didn't hear angels singing. It was just clear in that state that that's just how things are. There was no like, oh my God. They were just like, oh, right. Like, of course. It's just like, there's just the world. But there's mental, but there's just the world. I'm not here. There's just the room. And it was actually surprisingly stable. In fact, after a minute of this, I tried to kind of shake it off. It's not that I was concerned. I was just fascinated. And I was like, wow, this is like, I can't. But then the wowness of it actually immediately collapses it. So it's like the second you have this like too much of a
good thing,
zealous attitude towards it, you immediately go and it just like disappears and you're just like you again. So the agency just comes back. But then I've heard the concept before. I've heard teachers talk about it. I've read about it. But when I experienced it, I was like, oh yeah, it's exactly what I like. Yeah, that's like that's what you're aiming for, I guess, in the Eastern traditions, which is to realize that there is no self, there is no ego. It's not a metaphor. It doesn't exist, And this very thin filament of the self that we carry throughout the day, even though it's insistent, it is paper thin. It's almost, Sam Harris always says, it's almost too close to you for you to be able to notice, but it's so thin. So it's like the second it disappears, it's just like it was like a bubble, and it was nothing else. And from that state, you're talking about like the being in the good place. That is the best place, because you realize that not only you're not in control of anything, it's not really. It's not like you have to defend this thing that you feel that you do need to defend. Like, if there's no me, then there's nothing that is mine. If there's no me, that there's nothing that needs to be done, really. If there's no me, there's no one to attack, because there's no me. There's just what happens. And that's a very easy place to be in.
So you had an experience where you were aware of, you reached an awareness.
I was just awareness.
Just awareness.
Just awareness.
Just observation.
Yeah. That's, by the way, this is how I know. Then when people are being, when people tell you things like, I've transcended my dualist perception, like they say, I transcended my ego.
Yes.
But they say it in such a way that's like, clearly you didn't.
Yes.
Yes. It's like I don't even know. You're so lost that you don't even know you're lost. Like,
yes.
It's just like there's no one home. There's no one to talk to. It's like people take sometimes not one lifetime, sometimes lifetimes to try and get there. And here you are with your TikTok, with your Instagram, and you've achieved enlightenment. That's amazing. That's crazy. It's all of a sudden everybody enlightened. People try to do it for thousands of years.
Yeah, and you did it on a 30-second TikTok.
No problem. Crazy. So, but this is how it's so clear. I'm not, by the way, it's so clear to me that I'm so far away from that. It's like, I don't know. But when people say that, it's just so crazy to me, because there's a certain signature. It's like when you're in that state, you don't feel the need. Well, I mean, I was falling asleep, so I didn't know. I don't really know. I didn't run the test. But I would assume that if you walk into a room full of people, and somehow you manage to keep this state, I don't think I would feel the need to come to people like this and go, hello. Like, I wouldn't, like, there would be none. What is this shit? Like, what is this? Like, it's just like, it's just like you behave normal. Like, you just inside, you just like feel very like this, just like it's so obvious. The second you have these like extra flavors of the thing, it's obviously an act, So in that sense, I think we need to be a little bit more. I'm a big fan of whatever works. I took for a few years. I was studying with Eric Klein in LA. Great acting teacher. Shout out to Eric if he's ever watching it. And it was the Tony Barr School of Acting. So it was based on the system developed by Tony Barr. And Tony Barr's big thing was always, people would always ask him, like, do you prefer Meisner? Do you prefer the method, like Stanislavski, whatever? And he was like, he always say, I'm a big fan of whatever works. Mm. So this whole debate about, is it theater? Is it camera? Is it imagination? Is it he's like, dude, does it look good? Do people feel things when you do the thing?
That's all that matters.
And then whatever you got to do to get there, right? Because it's not about what works. It's what works for what and for who and when. It's what are you trying to do? You're trying to make people feel something. Great. So whatever you got to do to get there. And I feel the same about the human enterprise. Mm-hmm. Is it spiritual? Is it science? What are you trying to do? And then you have to remember that there's physical ramifications to what you're doing. So you definitely need science for that. There's mental and mental health and social interaction ramifications. You definitely need more spiritual components to that, maybe psychology. I'm not against like combining all these things. You need to combine modern understanding with deep ancient wisdom to get to a thing that is complete, if you ask me. It's people, you can't ignore what the Buddha discovered, which is definitely a real thing. Mm-hmm. And you also can't ignore the fact that we can now build rockets, and the Buddha could never build a rocket.
Mm-hmm.
So who is more right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the wrong question. It's just we're doing different things, but
Mm-hmm.
they're all required to do something.
Mm-hmm.
This is a discussion I've had recently with Mickey. I'm going to release a conversation that I've had with him in the beginning of the year, and now we're releasing it. And it's kind of crazy how relevant it is. And I don't remember if in that conversation I said that, but definitely during our recent conversations more, I was saying it, which is that the divine would be beautiful, I would assume, right? I mean, obviously it would contain everything, including the darkness and everything, but beauty would definitely be a big part of it, right? And beauty has a certain aesthetic. It's not just aesthetic. Beauty has more than that. I think beauty is like a real thing. But there's something about, like, I would imagine that the ultimate mind, if it's like a creator that designs, not like like we were talking about in idealism, but let's say there is like this ultimate designer. If you believe we're part of this larger mind, they kind of, set up all these things and then just press play, you would imagine that it would be the ultimate software designer. It would have such a mind that is capable of creating the ultimate beauty, even if that beauty takes time to unfold, to fully formulate. So the reason I'm saying it is because there's a certain flow to things that would exist in reality in that case. And and I would imagine then that everything, including the mistakes, would somehow, in the end, when you look back, it will look like it's perfectly played a role.
Mm-hmm.
Even the things that were like mistakes would still somehow play a role in making the whole thing look beautiful. So in that sense, if you look at rockets from back in the day, NASA that built them, it's like very, like just like, all right, we should just stick to space. 90% of it detaches and burns. That's not a beautiful system. That's just like kind of like, it's clunky. It's like necessary to get to where we need to get. That's fine. But it's not, there's no aesthetic to it. There's no beauty to it. You now look at rockets, Falcon 9, like what Elon Musk is doing, it's more beautiful. It's more because the thing detaches, but then it comes back. Mm-hmm. There's like a circulation. It's closer to what nature is doing, which is like recycle. Everything plays a role, right? And folds into itself, kind of like it has this flowy thing. So why would it be the case that the second we discover, let's say that all of this is true. Let's say we discover that there's a mind beyond and we're going to transcend to the thing. Why would it be like a rocket from the 70s in which everything we did scientifically just detaches and burns out? It wouldn't be like that. It would somehow play a role into the thing. So you have 250 years of modern science, maybe 100 years of like actual, like real technical science, but like these things are for something. The way that I see it is we're about to stape. Yeah, my brain's like gone right now. Whoa. They have a lot of alarms here, you know that?
I'm just going to find a video. I want to show you a clip of something, if you don't mind.
But this actually brings me nicely to the galaxy stuff. So
yeah, we haven't even talked about anything galaxy yet.
Yeah. So we're about to step. The way that I see it, we're about to step into the galaxy. We're about to step. This is our new home. And we will have to bring with us the scientific understanding that we honed in for a few centuries. But we will also have to bring with us, again, the reverence for the divine, the present moment, like all of this stuff. So combination is always the way to go.
We, you and I have talked many times about DMT. And I mentioned to you before over WhatsApp about near-death experiences. There's a particular clip, here it is. There's a particular video. Am I able to share my screen, mate?
You're allowed, I think.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. One second before you do, I'm gonna go pee real quick.
Okay, mate.
And it's gonna be on the audio, so it's gonna be good. Maybe who's obsessing? Play this girl.
What's that?
Play the girl.
Can you see her?
Uh-huh.
So, just a bit of context. This is a chick who took a heroin overdose, died, spoke to God, and she's now understood that she's a spirit and that she has a job to do, etc. But there's a particular part that I wanted to highlight.
And I decided that I would no longer be a victim to my circumstance. Now I would be the perpetrator in people's lives. And so that's what I did. I lived my life causing lots and lots of harm. And it progressed over the course of my life. I ended up having this near-death-like experience. I overdosed, and I was taken to the space of eternity in a non-physical realm, in blinding white light, enveloped in unconditional love, the same space that near-death experiencers describe. And I was guided into this space by loved ones I had crossed over. I had a boyfriend who had recently passed away. He was there to greet me. My father greeted me. And as I was traveling into the space of eternity, I was so pissed. I'm probably the only spirit to make it to heaven and actually be mad. I was like, what? I'm wrong? Because, in my life, I was a devout atheist. There had been so much dense energy that had happened to me in my life. There was no way that I was going to believe in a creator that would allow all those things to happen to me. And so I just stayed hidden from God, source, the universe, because it was just easier. And so when I made my way into this space, I was told that I was a divine spiritual warrior, that I had chosen to come to Earth and to live this life, and that I had chosen all of the adversity that I had experienced. The first part of my life was like boot camp, and the second part of my life would be carrying out the mission, and that I had to come back to Earth to do that. And I was like, oh, I'm not going back. Being in that space of eternity was the first time that I ever felt whole. My whole life, all of these experiences had happened to me that just kept fracturing me into these little shards of glass. Like every piece of me was so broken. And when I entered the space of eternity, it was like this amazing glue that just made me into this beautiful mosaic. And I was finally whole and complete. And there was no way that I was returning. And I said, I'm going to grab my pajamas and a bowl of popcorn. I'll watch the show from up here. No way. You cannot make me go back. I will not go back. And they said, okay, let us take you through the details of your pre-birth plan. It'll probably help you get through the rest of your life because you're going back. So they took me, it looked a lot like a video game in my mind's eye, which could have a lot to do with the generation that I was born in. So this man presented himself to me. He was wearing a plaid blazer and a fedora, and we were inside of a grocery store, and we had an empty grocery cart, and he said, pick your life. On the walls of the grocery aisles, it looked like there were these cereal boxes, and every cereal box had a life experience on it. And I just remember being this little orb of light, and I was like, well, if I'm going to Earth, I'm going to Earth. And I just start grabbing every cereal box I can get my figurative hands on. There's no body there, and I just start throwing everything into the cart. And, just the densest experiences. And so many of them, my soul is like this, this script writer who has no limits. Okay, we're going to experience all of these different things. And then there were also things in the cart that I hadn't gotten to in my life yet, like recovery and overcoming and being a teacher and still.
That's about it. So my question to you, sir, is based on your spiritual journey, how much she describes a DMT trip. She describes a going through the universe, landing in a place of unconditional love, etc. And I think we've both experienced that through DMT. What do you say when you hear her describe that as we are a spirit and we chose this? This is a simulated experience that you have got confirmation that is real. When you hear a story like that, do you give any credence? Do you give any relevance to it? Or do you think that was just a DMT experience her brain gave her during a near-death scenario and she came back and that was just an hallucination?
The first thing I would say is that doesn't feel like anything like I've ever had on DMT.
You haven't felt the unconditional love? And
Never on DMT.
Interesting.
Yeah. DMT things just, to me, they just feel very mechanical. and it has this vibe of this is just how things are.
Interesting.
It has no care. It has no care for your preferences. It's just this is what it is. And it actually feels much more like a super advanced civilization than anything divine. And only in the sense that, I mean, there's the good and the bad, and the beautiful things on DMT are extremely beautiful, and the terrifying things on DMT are extremely terrifying, but they're just extreme versions of, whatever in fact is possible experientially. But it never felt to me like you're meeting God, like in the way that we feel of God, like, the internal love and all of that. 5-MeO maybe would be closer to that, maybe.
Okay.
But definitely not NN. So that's just like on a technical side. It definitely doesn't feel like DMT to me. Also, the thing that makes me suspicious of all the claims that DMT takes you to see God. Like I personally don't think so. I think that at this point, with everything I'm experiencing, also outside of DMT, meeting certain individuals, talking to different people, it makes me not have the knee-jerk reaction I would have to a story like this before. Because I'm seeing, again, from my experience now, I'm seeing that there's certain things that are possible that I didn't consider that were possible before.
Likewise.
So I'm much more open to it. So that would be my short answer. Like, I'm at this moment in my life, I accept what she's saying is probably true. But I'm remaining sensitive to, if I wouldn't have my life's experiences as I've had them till this day, I would have no reason to take what she's saying as anything more than maybe not a delusion, but a way of the brain to cope with the amount of pain, right? So I would give it a very physicalist explanation. But I did have the experiences that I've had now, and I can't remain scientific if I ignore certain things that I now know to be true. If I have to ask myself, really, why did I change my position? It's because my whole life, nothing really happened to me experientially to tell me that I should change my mind about any of it, because everything else made sense. I was like, yeah, but after having certain experiences, certain things become less tenable and other things become more tenable. And that's, you always navigate through your experience. And I think that, and I'm really talking about myself mainly. It's not like I'm saying it to other people, but
Sure.
It now, when I'm more accepting of these things because of the experience that I've had, it's now clear to me that it's all experience-based. So even it's so clear to me now that even the scientists who say, I would spin on a dime if I would just presented the right information, they have a worldview that is pretty rigid. So but I understand it. I get it. Like, I don't blame them. There's no reason for them to change their minds. They didn't have certain kinds of experiences. How could they possibly know? I don't blame them, because for the majority of human development, the only thing that came out of religious and spiritual belief is evil.
I agree.
You see what I'm saying?
I do.
So the one thing we found that took us away from that trajectory is science. It was the Enlightenment. It was the understanding that we can actually probe the world and understand it. And it freed us from the shackles of the environment and what, the environment dictates, and also from the fear-induced society. Like, because most of religious structures always like fear-inducing, at least like, modern religions. And that's not a healthy state either. And spiritual people will tell you, yeah, but this is it's not like that. Like, we're not speaking like the Catholic Church. We're saying all these beautiful things. Yes, it is true, but you can't unless you had the experience yourself, which she had, unless the scientist who is listening to her will have that experience, you must have compassion towards the scientists that they're completely justified to not change their minds. Why do they need to take your word for it? For all of humanity, what we proved to be is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Humans are wrong almost all the time about everything, right? So if that's the trend, why would I assume that the trend now is different because you had an experience? Everything tells me that only with science we managed to get to a place that is relatively manageable. And people, and again, this is where the facts really matter, because a lot of people would say, well, look at the world now, it's crumbling. Read Steven Pinker's book. I forget what it's called, the recent one, about he looks at all the measures, all the statistics. We're doing way better than any other human who have ever lived.
Yep.
By any measure. And this idea that 2,000 years ago people were happier, it's an idea you have. People mostly died in their sleep from their teeth falling into their throat.
Yeah, infections, disease. Yeah.
So it's like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? So the only thing we ever found and got us out of the situation is science. So even though I am now in a position where I'm like, oh shit, just like her, like I was wrong? Fuck. Okay. But it's very easy to fall into the evangelist trap, in which the second you discovered it, now anybody who didn't discover it is an idiot. Why is that?
Yep.
Like you just remember yesterday you didn't think that.
Yeah.
Right? So just have a little bit more compassion towards the momentum of the trajectory of understanding. We spent 200 years trying to understand the world, which by the way is very hard.
Yeah.
It's not like we discovered the thing and it was just a joyride, right? Discovering things that work is really hard. It's really hard. Most of it doesn't work. People spend their lives dedicating to making the thing work for you, so you can sit and complain while you while you're taking a shit. And it's a Louis C.K. joke. It's like so you can make a dumb comment on TikTok while you're taking a dump. It's like they toiled their whole life, and now you're shitting on everything that they did. So it's like, have a little bit more humility, right? But on the other hand, yeah, like the truth is that now I'm much more open to what you're saying because I've had the experiences I've had, and this is why I think giving people these experiences is the only way forward, because nothing can shift someone's position but them being exposed to the information as it is.
Yes. I want to talk to you about your DMT experience then, because I've got a feeling then, but based on what you said a moment ago, that perhaps maybe, well, I don't know. My experience of DMT when I've done it 3 times, and 2 of the first time I took a very small dose to figure it out. Second time I took
Just so I understand, it was a 5-MeO or NN?
Well, this is now my question. I don't know, because my experience was emotional. My experience was profound. Gathered a load of answers, but in my experience, I saw entities. I felt love. I actually started crying and sobbing during the experience because of the.
Oh, that's just because you're a little girl, man.
More than likely as well, yeah. But it sounds like your experience with DMT is more literal.
No, what you're describing is a 5-MeO experience, brother.
5-MeO, right? Okay, so that's the DMT I have. It's a yellow powder. No. Is that right?
I don't think you're going to be able to see the laser with that.
Right. Okay. So there's. I'm aware of ayahuasca. I'm aware of
ayahuasca, but that's not the active ingredient in ayahuasca. Ayahuasca is NN-DMT.
NN-DMT.
Yeah. It's not what you've had.
So I've experienced 5-MeO DMT.
Yeah.
So would you mind educating me? What is the difference between the two?
So NN-DMT is 2 nitrogen molecules attached to it. Atoms attached to it, and 5-MeO is 5-methoxy and an oxygen. So it's just a different chemical component. In fact, but experientially they're very different.
Right.
I'm echoing a lot of Psychonauts' voice when I'm saying if 5-MeO wouldn't have the word DMT in it, you wouldn't even like drug. It's a completely different thing. It doesn't feel anything like the other thing. NN feels more like a continuation of where mushroom stops.
Right.
So like very strong mushrooms, that's where NN-DMT begins, and then it goes into like this, like another space. 5-MeO is completely different because it's much more what you're saying. It's much more in the body. It's much more emotional. It's much more meeting God. It's much more that. I have to say, because I've done it, and this is, I've only done it once, and I've done it after years of experience with NN-DMT.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say that it does feel, first of all, the some people get some visuals. I was one of them. So at the tail end of the experience, I got some visuals, and these visuals they almost look more acid-like than DMT or mushrooms, in that they were kind of like slick. Like, so there's this like this curvature to them and slickness that the NN experience doesn't have to it. So NN feels much more visually substantial. So the objects you see on NN, they're very well defined. Like I always say they're like this, like
Yep.
just very well defined in space. And they're very, very complex, obviously, and doing all kinds of crazy things, but they're very well defined. With 5-MeO, it was very difficult to map things. Even though I saw the visuals, they were much more kind of like this. It's almost like you're looking into this multi-dimensional crazy thing that your mind just can't wrap itself around. But you see it, but it's like it's moving in ways that you can't comprehend.
Okay.
And there's nothing that it does that your mind can land on and say, oh, this is like that. You can't do that. Like with NN, you can kind of do that. You can say, oh, this thing was like a very complex cube or something like that. On 5-MeO, this option flies out the window. You just can't do it. And in that sense, I'm always, now that I know that this space is real, I always say things like I'm about to say with some trepidation, because I don't want to offend anybody, but it did feel to me in that moment that was the architect. Like that's the above the thing. Like it's
on 5-MeO.
Yes, it's like
right.
the big architects.
Yes.
And then NN feels, even though it's still insane, it feels more like the management company. It's kind of like they're doing all the, yeah.
Interesting. So, okay. And the active ingredient in ayahuasca is 5-MeO or NN?
No, it's NN.
NN. So I haven't even opened that door yet then. So
yeah,
in
and
your...
I do think, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, in your experience, other than the description you've just given, what does NN-DMT, what did NN offer you that was different to 5-MeO?
I've never done 5-MeO until that one time.
I see, but so you've done it once. So what was the difference between the two? Like
the 5-MeO is definitely much more like therapeutic. It's for you.
Gotcha.
In fact, it kept on telling me, like, because I'm also now engaged with the project that I'm engaged with, so I see myself as somebody who's mapping the space, and I've never done 5-MeO, so it was important for me to try. So in that sense, I entered the space also with some attempt to try and understand and map the space. And at a certain point towards the end where I could kind of make left or right, the thing kept on telling me, okay, just let go. Just stop trying to understand. Just let it work through you. Let it work through you. And I guess my mind is just so, that's what it does. It's just who I am. Eventually it was like, okay, just do whatever you got to do. It's just, he'll come around, but for now, just do your thing. And then that was the experience.
He'll catch up.
He'll catch up. He'll be fine. It was actually a really funny moment because it wasn't like, it was with a lot of love and compassion. It wasn't like, oh, you're a lost case. It was like, okay. It's just, we see you can't help yourself. have at it. It's okay.
So there's entities on double N?
Double N, definitely entities. I'm talking about the 5-MeO right now.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, so the 5-MeO, I know it's confusing. So I know the 5-MeO, it didn't feel like one distinct entity. It felt like a presence.
Yes,
like
agreed.
It to me always feels like many, but this is my mind playing tricks on me. On NN, it's much more distinct. There's like concrete people.
Right.
Like I've actually saw some humans too.
Tell me more.
Basically like humans from the future. Like one time I saw like a screen that appeared, and it was like a regular, like what you would imagine TV to be
Yep.
100 years from now, just kind of hovering in the air, and it's just like a screen, just like a hologram screen, but it was super distinct.
Yep.
Like I wanted to be
Clear
super
as day.
clear, like super distinct. Yeah, just like there. And I saw people like an Asian guy with a suit, and he was talking to somebody. But he
Wow.
wasn't like a cartoon person. He was like a person.
Yep.
It wasn't like a CGI person. It was like a person. And he was talking to somebody. It's like somebody put a camera on a person that was seeing him from the side, talking to somebody that I can't see, and he was just talking to them. It's almost like I was just.
Like
And then I saw all these. One time I saw all these kind of like pods like flying around in these mazes, and they just kind of fly over us, and people are just like this, like with their cameras. So it's like, it's almost like people from the future gets to visit the past through these tunnels, and they get to see what we're doing through these simulations. But we can't see them, but they can see us. We're like entertainment. They just kind of go through like all these.
Wow. And you mentioned before you've had conversations with these entities. We haven't even we've gone so far away from the galaxy now.
It's okay.
We'll do the galaxy next time.
We'll come up with a formula.
Yeah, we do need a structure, mate. I'll go down every road possible.
Oh, it's fine. I mean, I don't even if this is just for us, I'm fine with it. This is very entertaining for me, but also it gives me the practice, because usually when I would go on a podcast, I would just be asked a series of questions about a very particular thing, which is usually the discovery now, and I just develop my answers slowly. Like it becomes apparent to me what would be a better way to say a thing, right?
Yep.
But when it comes to, like I told you, like I would love to do a space episode with you.
Yes.
I reached out to you actually because it's my favorite thing.
Likewise.
But when we started, it became today. All of a sudden, it became obvious to me that this is already kind of like it was fascinating when it was new. So now it's like I understand so much more that this is beautiful, but my brain doesn't want to spend an hour talking about the galaxy, because it's like it's just not it's only in the context of like if we want to talk about like, you know, what kind of structures we're going to build in the galaxies, or things that are more like actionable basically. So I enjoy the very convoluted ride we're on to try and figure out what would be the best signature. And it's actually a great practice. If you ask me, it's a great practice, because if we are to do something at some point that is more structured, this is great practice, because we're going to get to like, okay, when we go down these rabbit holes, it just becomes this mess. So we need like a subject, or like we need something. But I'm definitely enjoying this conversation a lot, so I don't care.
Likewise, brother. Likewise. So with the you've had these conversations with the entities, and we've talked. And if people watch this back and they're not familiar with the DMT conversation or your discovery, we've talked in a 2-hour podcast that's on the channel that they can go and get a full debrief. But cliff notes.
They should do it. People, by the way, I want to tell you something. From all the podcasts that I've done so far, and I've done quite a few, yours was my favorite, and everybody else is going to hate me. But I think I don't know if it's because like one of the first ones. I mean, the first one was Soma, which was a great one. But you have this beautiful way of keeping like your wonder in place, and you putting that front and center instead of you trying to come across as anything smart or funny. You are these things, but you're not trying to make the show about that. And it makes the conversation very light, simple, and it also you lead the conversation because you're really interested in it, in directions that are very constructive for the conversation. So I want to say that. And a lot of people told me this, because I get a lot of emails, and a good chunk of these emails, I'm not kidding, is I saw your episode with Daniel Wheeler. It was phenomenal.
Oh, brother, I've got goosebumps.
So I want to tell you that this is yeah. That's why I told you myself. I was like, I would love to watch you interview other people, because you that are experts in things that you really are interested in, because you're great at that.
I don't even know what to say, but thank you. I appreciate the kind comments and the feedback, and none of it's even conscious. I'm just so fascinated with the person I'm talking to. I'm like, give me more. Give me more. Give me more. I appreciate the feedback, mate. And that's great. Thank you. I actually watched back our podcast. What was it, last week, the week before? I find myself in a constant state of analyzing my own work so that I can become better and more fluid, etc. From my girlfriend's perspective, I'm just watching myself all the time. But it's less ego, it's more analysis. Like how could I?
Some people are more entertaining than others, man, and it's okay to be the one that is entertaining.
And I've watched it back now 2 or 3 times, but I watched it recently, a couple of weeks ago, last week, whatever it was, and I got to the end of it. I watched the full 2 hours, and I got to the end of it, and my conclusion was I really fucking liked that conversation. Like I was entertained by watching our conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I feel the same. So
Brilliant.
now that we're done stroking each other's egos, what do you want to ask me? This is what was it? Did you ever see this? I'm sure you did, because you do commentary on funny shit with this guy with the song. Just another guy with a podcast. Dun, dun.
No, I haven't seen that. No.
Oh, we gotta
show it to me.
I don't care if they're not gonna let us air this because of it. I don't know if we have to pause it every few. I don't know what, but I gotta show you this.
Just let it roll, mate. Yeah, let it roll. Our YouTube feeds are so different. I've got Terrence and Sam Harris.
I don't care what you have a PhD in. If you cannot physically overpower me, you cannot tell me what to do.
Ooh, another white boy with a podcast. Crypto, gym bro. Pronouns, hell no. Meal prep, sports bed. My dog wants to lick my balls.
I don't care what you have a PhD in. If you cannot physically overpower me, you cannot tell me what to do.
Ooh, another white boy with a podcast.
Oh God, that is so funny with that beginning bit as well. Oh yeah. Yeah, some dude on a podcast with his ego on display. Ooh, just another white dude with a podcast. Oh God, that's so funny. So, with your experience with DMT, we know there's a simulation. You've seen it. Like how many people have replicated it now?
200,000 million. No.
I was like, that's a big increase since 300 last time.
Is that even a number? I think at this point I stopped counting, but we are writing a report. So at this point I'm gonna have to track back and actually remember most of them. I think over 200.
Over 200. Fantastic. Yeah. So
now they're adding. Sorry, I'm cutting off. Now it's going crazy fast now because people are more aware and everybody are ordering the lasers and doing the things. So it's like a whole thing. Go ahead.
So the DMT-X, that the Imperial University of Psychedelics, that experiment there.
It's so funny you call that. It's just the Imperial College in London, bro.
I'm sure it says Imperial College of University.
I don't know where you get that from.
Are you sure, mate?
I want to see where it said that.
Universal. No, it's Imperial. Imperial College of Psychedelics. I can't spell for shit today. Imperial College. Okay, I see where my confusion is. So it's Imperial College London, Imperial College, yep, and then the description is the Centre of Psychedelic Research at Imperial.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So that's where I've okay, fine, okay. You were right.
They should be a Royal Imperial College of Psychedelics for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Let's make one.
100%. So you're not off. We might create it one day. So
let's do it. So the DMT that they
Sir Rolling Balls.
So the DMT that they're experimenting with is NN-DMT. Is that right?
Yes. Wow. But they are going to introduce 5-MeO research as well. And
from your knowledge, you haven't done the 5-MeO with the laser.
I just can't imagine in my work. I just can't imagine technically the thing, because 5-MeO makes you just faint. Like it just makes you go like,
Yeah, you pass out almost. Yeah.
You can't really hold your heads. Like you can't.
No.
NN would also take you to like a hyperspace if you do enough of it. But even if you do, it's not like if you would be standing, you would just keep standing. You would just be like frozen in time, and you're just going to be somewhere, but your eyes are going to be open and everything. You're just going to be standing there until you snap back out of it. But with 5-MeO, I can't even imagine you standing.
No, I had to lay down and lay back, close my eyes, like I had to surrender to it all.
It basically feels like, you know, when people compare, they say some breath work can induce DMT-like states. Definitely not like NN-DMT. No,
Right.
There's no way. There's no way. But 5-MeO, simply because the content is so concrete. But with 5-MeO, I can totally see the resemblance. Like if you do a lot of breath work, you can kind of go into this whiteout. You kind of go into this like you know.
So I'm so fascinated now because my only experience is 5-MeO. That's my only experience with DMT. But like you say, well, based on the distinct differences, it's almost like it's a different. You're describing something completely different that I'm unable to connect with yet because my experience has been 5-MeO. So could you give me a little bit more clarity on you've mentioned NN-DMT is concrete, it's structured, it's almost tangible to the point where it's like you're going somewhere else. Would that be a good description?
Yeah, it's just like entering a different room.
A different room, but you're in the same room.
This is the other thing. So NN is very, I think, jarring for people because it's so bizarre. It's so strange.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like it's not things you've ever seen before, but not like kind of I smoked some weed and here's an interesting thought that I've never had before. It's not like this. It's like the building blocks of what you see belongs to a different family of things that you've never even considered were possible to imagine. It's like the building blocks of the visuals are completely different than anything you've ever seen, which, by the way, puts to rest any idea of it being constructed by your previous experiences. It doesn't resemble any of them. Like it's completely different. It's like a complete wipe clean of your reality and a new reality that follows the different laws of physics. Your emotions are of a different flavor. You have emotions you've never had before. Like it's just
wow.
it's so bunker. It's so bonkers, and it's so it's like Terrence McKenna said, the only real danger is death by astonishment.
Is that a genuine fear? Do you think? Not fear, but like it's fantastical.
No. There's no physical danger whatsoever. But it's to illustrate the point that the level of awe and astonishment is so great that your mind might just explode.
Gotcha.
You just like it's a level of what the fuck that you just like what? Like it's just like and it's also coming on so fast. It's like a torpedo. Like it's like 5-MeO too, but 5-MeO it's more like you just you fade out.
Yes.
With NN,
You're
you
launched.
feel this like general anesthesia kind of taking over your body, and then the second you start like it's really coming on, it just goes from 0 to 10 million. Like that. It just goes and just everything just you're just like you're just shot, and it's so fast. It's like imagine the fastest roller coaster. You're strapped to a rocket.
Yeah.
So okay, the closest thing I've ever seen. Did you see Doctor Strange?
I know of it, but yeah, go on.
The scene where she takes him out of the body?
No.
Okay, so
Show me that.
I actually read about this because I said whomever made this scene did DMT for sure.
100%. Yeah.
But I read about it later, which we can't know for sure. But it said no. Like a lot of people asked that, but no, they didn't do DMT. It was just like great imagination. But let me share it with you.
That sounds like someone who's scared to say they've done DMT.
Quite literally. Sorry, go ahead.
That sounds like someone who was scared to say they've done DMT publicly.
Yeah, maybe. So this is what I'm about to show you is quite literally what it feels like.
Okay.
Quite literally.
Okay.
I see through you.
Not this part. I'll tell you when.
It's a great visual.
What did you just do to me?
I pushed your astral form out of your physical form.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
It's just tea. With a little honey.
What just happened?
For a moment, you entered the astral dimension.
What?
A place where the soul exists apart from the body.
Why are you doing this to me?
To show you just how much you don't know. Open your eyes.
His heart rate is getting dangerously high.
He looks all right to me.
Okay, so from this point on, this is DMT can do a lot of different things. This is one of the things that it can do to the T. You can feel that this is really happening to you, what's about to happen to him.
So we haven't seen the bit yet.
But
We haven't seen the bit yet. I was impressed by the wormhole.
no.
Okay.
From this point on,
Okay.
everything he's going to experience, you can quite literally believe this is happening to you.
Okay.
Like, not kind of, like physically, you would feel that this is happening.
Okay.
He looks all right to me.
You think you know how the world works. You think that this material universe is all there is. What is real? What mysteries lie beyond the reach of your senses? At the root of existence, mind and matter meet. Thoughts shape reality. This universe is only one of an infinite number. Worlds without end. Some benevolent and life-giving. Others filled with malice and hunger. Dark places where powers older than time lie, ravenous and waiting.
The graphics are fantastic.
In this vast multiverse, Mr. Strange. Have you seen that before in a gift shop?
Have you seen that before?
Teach me.
Mate, I kind of feel like I kind of feel like you're the bald-headed chick, and I'm Doctor Strange, and me meeting you is doing this to me.
Yeah,
you will see, young grasshopper.
Yeah,
wow.
Basically. I wish I would be that wise, but yeah, no. So that's the difference. That's how realistic and specific NN-DMT can feel, and there ain't no fucking way a breathwork will give you that. I don't care what you say. There's no fucking way.
That's the sound clip. That's the trailer. Oh, my brother, thank you so much for your time today, man. I just feel illuminated every time we speak, man. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you a lot, man, and it was absolutely my pleasure.
My brother, I will let you go now. Thank you so much, mate, and we'll speak soon. Peace and love.
All right, brother. Bye.
Take care, mate.